We have three inspiring speakers today. Stuart MacDonald, Director of Research and Operations with CLES, the National Organisation for Local Economies, Avon Williams, CEO of Circular Communities Cymru, and Paul Hughes, Chief Officer at Pembrokeshire Frame. Each will talk for about 15 to 20 minutes, with a chance for some questions if they're particularly burning at that time, before we open for further discussion and questions. Please don't hold off on your questions and thoughts, put them into the chat, and we'll make notes as we go along. So I'm delighted to introduce firstly Stuart. Over to you. Stuart is the Director of Research and Operations and leads on all of CLES's research work and the strategic operations of the organisation. Over to you.
Well, Jessie, not quite all, but yeah. So I lead the research programme, and I'm going to talk to you today about community wealth building. So I'm going to put these slides on the screen. Could somebody, Jessie, could give me a thumbs up just to make sure? Yeah.
Yep, all good.
Okay, brilliant. So, as introduced, I'm Stuart MacDonald, Director of Research and Operations at Centre for Local Economic Strategies. Established in 1986, we call ourselves a think-do tank. So we're very much involved in developing policy recommendations and developing policy, but supporting our partners to implement things on the ground. We do research, we develop ideas, we convene conversations about local economic change. And for the past 15 or so years, I guess, we've been very much focused on community wealth building and building and leading, I would say, the community wealth building agenda across the UK. So I'm going to give you a kind of broad outline of what it is that we mean by community wealth building, what it is, and the problems it seeks to tackle. We are facing a period of increasing inequality, and we link that back to the growing extraction of wealth from place. We are the only developed economy where wages fell while the economy was growing, and 1 in 5 are now living in poverty. We have a problem with the way that wealth is distributed, but it's not a short-term thing. It's something that's been going on for a good while. If you look at this chart, it shows the long range of history in terms of the amount of wealth that flows into people's pockets. So the wealth that we generate, which goes to labour. And you can see that broadly since the beginning of the 1900s, that share of wealth that goes to labour has been in decline. So capital is extracting the value that we create, not workers. On a little bit of a shorter run history, we can see that while GDP has been growing, so has the poverty rate. Average incomes have been falling. So we say that there's something structurally wrong with an economy that can grow while growing poverty and declining average incomes. The wealth that's being generated is not flowing to the people that generate it. We are in an age of polycrisis. Work is no longer a route out of poverty. We're facing multiple interacting and overlapping crises, from housing to the cost of living. Life expectancy is declining in many places for the first time in 200 years. Something is structurally wrong with the way that we are organising our society. We face these cost of living crises. People can't afford the basics of energy and food. And all of that happens before we start to consider the real risk of ecosystem collapse. We spend all of our time addressing the symptoms of these crises without really interrogating the reasons for them. And we would contend that it is the way that our economy functions. These are the outcomes of our economy. So community wealth building is a people-centred approach to local economic development, which tries to open this conversation and change the way that our local economies work. It seeks to put wealth back into local economies and back into the control of people within places. So building an inclusive economy requires us to find the change agents who can actually make this happen? So how do we engage businesses, the social sector, the public sector? How do we leverage our land, our pension funds, and bring to it a social innovation that helps us build a more inclusive economy for all? Now, community wealth building is an approach built up around 5 pillars or 5 principles, and it seeks to harness the collective power of people within place. So how can we collectively leverage each of these pillars to build what we call a more inclusive economy? And really what we're focusing on is inclusive ownership of that economy. How can we make sure that local people have control over the economy in which they live? So the pillars are around the use of land and property. How do we make sure that all of our land and property is socially productive? How do we think about the money that we spend within our economy to make sure that it circulates within our economy, it creates jobs within our economy, and it supports local economic growth? If we're going to rebuild a local economy, it's going to need financing, but global finance has moved far away from the local. How do we think about different financial mechanisms for supporting our local economy? And how do we build our labour market so that it's fair and just, and that local people have opportunity to get good, well-paid jobs? So if we can bring all those pillars together, we can start to build a more inclusive economy. When we talk about an inclusive economy, we talk about business typology and business ownership on this graph here. So ranging from extractive on the far left to the more generative. And we would argue that our economy has tipped too far towards the extractive end of this spectrum. So our economy is increasingly dominated by limited corporations, by multinational corporations, who may produce, who may create jobs in our place, but the real value that they create is extracted from our place, extracted to places like Luxembourg, where there's no tax. If you think about the big multinational corporations like Amazon, who increasingly dominate in terms of our online shopping. So how do we tip back this balance towards the more generative types of business form, the privately owned businesses, the SMEs, the worker-owned co-ops, the non-profit businesses that do social value by default? They invest in local people, they spend with local suppliers, and they circulate money within their local economy. These are just some of our publications around social care. So we've done quite a bit of work around how do you address some of these really extractive players within the social care market? How do we get our institutions to think about the behaviours that they apply in their purchasing and their commissioning, so that we can support and we can grow locally owned, socially owned providers of things like adult social care? So we work with what we call anchor institutions in place. And these institutions, we argue, have significant capital which hasn't been levered as well as perhaps it could be. So they have significant financial, economic, intellectual, social, and human capital in place, which is not effectively being brought together. So universities produce educational outcomes, hospitals produce health outcomes, but they also spend millions of pounds in the local economy. They also potentially employ thousands of people and have land and property portfolios which are extensive. How do you bring all of these institutions in place together to collectively leverage that institutional power for the benefit of the local economy? So community wealth building, we would argue, is a new approach to local economic development, one which challenges the idea of trickle-down economics. We all know that redistributing wealth after it's been created doesn't work. We can see growing GDP and growing poverty doesn't work. So how do we think about questions of free distribution? This is thinking about who owns wealth, who creates wealth, and giving more people opportunity to create wealth for their place. So community wealth building is about wealth, it's about power, it's about institutions, but it's about community. So I'm just going to give some examples in practice. Community wealth building as a tool, as a set of principles, as an approach can be used at any scale. So this is an example in Huntly, a very small market town up near Aberdeenshire, town centre in massive decline. The community have come together. They've come together with the local institutions, with the health service, with the council, and with the private sector. So we've got banks that are in retreat, leaving vacant spaces. The community has taken ownership of the high street. They own now co-working spaces, small workshops, community centres, and they're looking to buy a hotel and a cinema, all within a single market square. In Preston, a town a fair bit bigger than Huntly, where we've managed to pull together a partnership of these local anchor institutions. So the university, the council, the housing association, the college, and the police. And they've come together to think about their spending behaviour and how that can collectively support the local economy. And as a result, new food co-ops and tech co-ops have been supported. Preston moved out of the bottom 20% in the index of multiple deprivation. They're using their pension funds to invest in the local area, and they're looking to establish a municipal energy company and a bank. In Birmingham, a whole lot larger than Preston. We've got a collection of anchor institutions which include health trusts, housing associations, the police. Collectively, those institutions employ 50,000 people. And if you took them as a single employer, they are the largest employer. And they spend £5 billion a year, every year. So if we can shift and influence how just a small amount of that money is spent, you can have significant impacts for the local economy. In Birmingham, we have a community wealth builder in residence. He's employed by CLES, but he works between these institutions. He brokers conversations, he pulls them together, he sets up small teams to address some of the social challenges across Birmingham. We've established now anchor networks across Sandwell, Wolverhampton, Dudley and Walsall, which has allowed us to look at this at a combined authority level. So another scale again. We've established this network of networks, and if you bring together all the institutions within that geography, they spend £10.5 billion a year. Now, to put that in context, the Levelling Up Fund is about £1.2 billion per year for the whole of England. So, significant amount of money if you can start to influence and shape how that flows. We're talking about 200,000 employees, collectively the biggest employer by country mile. Now, those are all urban examples, but community wealth building can equally be applied in a rural context and a market town context, much more relevant for the geography and economic geography of Wales, perhaps. So in places like North Ayrshire, along with procurement, they're looking at models around community-owned tourism. In Argyll and Bute, we're looking at how we can build greater community ownership of wind energy. In Lewes, addressing the housing crisis and building socially owned models for retrofit so that we have the right skills that we need within the local community to address the challenge of the next 20 years. And working across the market towns of Stroud to build a collective approach to building wealth locally. In essence, what we're trying to do is redirect flows of wealth into the local economy. when that wealth lands, we want it to stick, we want it to circulate, we want local businesses to buy from local businesses and local people to buy locally. So there's a clear economic rationale for circulating money. But there are also social and environmental rationale for doing exactly the same thing. So you can think of community wealth building as a set of tools for addressing the questions raised by the donut model, donut economics, or 15-minute cities. You know, how do we shorten supply chains so that we're not just destroying the environment unnecessarily? And I guess that links into, of course, the circular economy model. So how can community wealth building be viewed in that context as a set of tools? So that's it. I'm going to stop there, and I'll look forward to your questions in the panel session, unless anything is burning right now.
Thank you, Stuart. That was a really fantastic overview. And I think that kind of notion of focus and concentration on place as the kind of the locus where things are extracted from, but also where the hope sits. And there's a question that sort of echoes some of my thoughts about where did the energy come from for change in those places? How did it happen? Was it a collective of people? There's another comment in the chat, which is about the role of the public services boards being a sort of catalyst for that change. So yeah, perhaps you could just say a few words about where the energy came from for, say, in Ayrshire or Huntly, or was it individuals or was it collectives? Or yeah,
it's different in every place, but I guess it can start from the community. I think Huntly was very much a community-driven project. They were a town that had missed out on a regeneration funding program when they decided to come together and to do something about it. They pushed that, but I guess often this is a conversation that's convened by the local authority.
Right.
The challenge is that often places would like to engage with community wealth building as an agenda, but the extent to which it's just because they're trying to tick a box is where we have to really push past. So we can easily convene a roundtable of the chief exec of a local authority, a health trust, a university, and they all want to be seen to be doing community wealth building, and they quite happily put their logo on a page and be seen. But to change institutional behaviour requires buy-in across and throughout the depth of an institution. So there's no good just the chief executive signing up. It needs to be director level, it needs to be officer level, and the front line. Everyone needs to understand why they're addressing a community wealth building approach. But I guess what you need in place is the leadership to really own it. If there's not a vision for why this is happening, then it's not going to progress. So in terms of energy, the natural convener is the local authority, to have that vision and to drive it forward and to convene those conversations and to create those spaces where it can happen.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Really appreciate that. I can see lots of sort of nodding and in agreement. I think there's a further question which is around nuances based on the Welsh context, but I'm going to, if it's okay with you, Jessica, save that until we've got all three speakers, because I think we'll be able to pick up on that then. So I'm going to, if there are no further burning questions, I'm going to introduce our second speaker, who is Avion Williams from Rhuthun Courthouse. Avion Williams is CEO of Circular Communities Cymru, which is an organisation dedicated to looping the value of material and monetary resources into regrowing our communities. It's one of a number of sister organisations globally, each utilising the other's blueprints to speed up the global arrival at zero waste. Diolch, Avion.
Sorry for the delay. I'm sitting in the old courthouse in Rhuthun Square, which is where the Welsh Revolution in 1401 started. This is the building, or the replacement building, that was built by Owain Glyndwr's liberating army. So the beams you see behind me were built by a very different community to the one living here today. So that's I'm going to set the bar in that kind of revolutionary tone. A DIY approach to community redevelopment. I've been involved, my organisation in various forms and guises has been involved in the zero waste movement since the early 2000s. I joined in 2003, and we've been doing quite a bit over the last, well, nearly quarter of a century. So when you hear me being a little bit critical of the circular economy or the donut model, please rest assured that I am actually on side with going a little bit further than resource efficiency. So these are the kind of things that we do. I won't stay long with the kind of a corporate sell, but you know, we've been doing in the past when the first community fridges were set up, we were doing training for those groups. We also commissioned and own the Environment Eisteddfod chair, which we take around Wales to have people from various communities sit in to acknowledge their contribution to the cause. And in recent years, we've been sort of working in the background on a local wealth distribution system, a type of circular currency, more commonly known as mutual credit. And we've been looking at, beyond the business plan, how we can actually weave that into the circularity of resources, which is more our traditional base, if you like. These little symbols represent, over the nearly quarter of a century, some of the projects we've been involved with, initiated and designed. So there's probably a PowerPoint behind all of these. But our beginnings was the curbside box in Wales. We not only designed but initiated and rolled out. We ran the first curbside system in Cardiff with Seesaws that was replicated in Monmouthshire, Torfaen, and that later became adopted as the Welsh blueprint by the then Environment Minister Jane Davidson. Mel C, Sporty Spice. You can see they're sporting one of our boxes in Monmouthshire. So we come from an alliance called the Zero Waste International Alliance. Very few people know that was formed in Wales at the Bulkley Arms in 2003. We initiated that international conference and was part of the writing the definition for zero waste, which incidentally, it shouldn't have to be said, is 100%. You wouldn't believe the conversations we had in the run-up to that. One of the things we're doing at the moment is refining the precious plastic model. It's a model that started as a community-based plastic reuse, I wouldn't call it recycling, reuse system in the Netherlands. It ticks all the boxes in terms of its social benefit and environmental benefits, in that you're collecting plastic that's in the wrong place, in rivers and on streets and on beaches, and you're turning it into a resource, not through preaching, but through practical application and ownership of the system, so that people can come in and they're part of the unit. The kids bring in, or the pensioners group bring in their own plastic, and they make something that they take home. So it's a very practical, hands-on project in that sense. But I think we need to now, all of us in this sector, need to start examining the route. And just to quote a guy called Henry David Thoreau, this guy with the beard, who was an American essayist, whatever one of them is, and he said, a quote I've liked over the years: "There are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil to the one who is striking the root." And I think we all need to be I think with time ticking away now on climate change, we all need to be the one attacking the root in all of our communities. So in that spirit, I'm going to be hypercritical of something that's been in our own sector, if you like, and that's precious plastic. What it does, it creates the plastic object through compression and heat, but we're talking about an amalgam of plastics. So I have to go through the detail here to give you the critique as to why it needs improving. So you can imagine, mixed colors, mixed polymers. There's about 7 main polymers that do different things. You squeeze them all together. You can get them undone with huge industrial processes, something similar to a coking plant, but something a community could never afford to do. It's best to keep the polymers separate. In that way, you can apply each polymer for its particular use in a community, and a community can be plastic sustainable, creating its own goods, grips for climbing walls and covers for kids' iPhones, and the sky's the limit, isn't it? But we need to put recycling into the precious plastic model. So we've been supported by the lottery at the moment to do that in Wales. And if we get it right, because it's going to be a bumpy ride, we're all about creating exemplars through trial and error. So, we won't make any apologies there. But when we get to the end of our 2-year journey, we will hope to have a model to share with Wales and the rest of the world. And that is a Mark II, if you like, of the precious plastic model. So in this partnership, we're calling Precious Plastic Cymru. It will initially consist of Press Cooperative in the north, Croesain Coedwig, Welcome to Our Woods in the Rhondda, with our steer. And eventually we will let go of the baby because, we believe in community action and ownership. So we will move on to something else when we get this one right. And it'll be another little badge on our second slide, was it, that I showed you? And then it's over to you, sort of thing. I'd like to now sort of delve into zero waste and circular economy being the same thing, basically. The Arabic word for waste doesn't exist. And really, that's what the zero waste movement 25 years ago was all about. Imagining a world where waste didn't exist. Waste was a mistake by mankind, and I say that advisedly because it's usually men who were running the waste industry and the businesses, just destroying the planet's resources. So it's interesting that a country not in the West doesn't have a word for waste. Mawarid means resources, and if you look on zero waste websites, you won't see the term waste being used. And if it is there, it shouldn't be. So try and imagine. So people have said that circular economy is something different, that it's something beyond zero waste. In fact, the latest Welsh Government strategy is called Beyond Zero Waste. I would argue, however, just that it's the same thing. Imagine, if you will, a world where there is zero waste, that we no longer have waste. 100% of it goes back and is looped. Isn't that circular? That's a circular system. I think what circular economy at the moment is doing, unchecked, is something we need to keep an eye on. I think 99% of the players in the game have the hearts in the right place, but there is there's an area we need to keep an eye on where it's been, I would use the term, hijacked. So delving into that, then, one of the areas that the corporates are interested in is something called industrial symbiosis. On a simple level, this is factories put next door to each other, so the off heat from one goes into the production of another one, and you get a circular system. It all, it's very logical, and it's something, quite frankly, they should be doing anyway. This industrial symbiosis thing was I've removed the organization who put it together, the business, the corporate that put it together. This was part of a YouTube presentation, but you'll see on that linear line on the bottom there's a pile of banknotes. My question is, where, once you've created a circular economy amongst in an industrial symbiosis, if you don't change the business model, the business structure, where's the money going? Aren't we talking about extraction in a, you converting it into money and then extracting it elsewhere? You're driving up all of the problems that Stuart was referring to in his talk. And one thing COVID showed me was every square mile, if you like, throughout Wales, you can see that exploitation of corporates and the quarries and the mines and neglected communities. So we need to really examine the roots and try and think about how do we circulate wealth locally. This again mirrors what Stuart had put up, the wealth gap between what we create in the West and what we get in our pockets changes around 1979, the Thatcher-Reagan period, and it's gone on that curvature unchecked, regardless of government, red or blue. Okay, so I think we need to look at the business model and what Companies House do, and I think we all should start lobbying. Let's look at the history of the company. It's rooted in colonialism. One of the first mercantile companies was the infamous, I should say, East India Company, designed to march into a country and steal the resources, very often at the end of a battle of the gun. Then in 1885, the modern company comes down to a guy called Robert Lowe. Robert Lowe comes with his own family crest, kind of says where his interests lie. Selwyn, I can see you in the crowd. It's not going to be Blaenau Ffestiniog, is it? Or Ffestiniog, sorry. It's he's going to be Mr. Robert Lowe is going to be looking after his own here. He's considered the father of the joint stock company. And in the 100 or so years, 150 years since then, we had the Companies Act. I'll just move my thing so I can see what years. 2006. Largely, it remained the same. Strip down the Memorandum of Understanding, the Articles of Association of any register apart from your social enterprise models, the driving imperative of all companies is to make money. Ignore all else, just make money, and push that up year on year. I think that there needs. I'm not saying I have the answers how this should be done, but I think that company law should be changed, not just for people in our sector, but for all companies. I don't think we can do it through badges and schemes and discussion. I think at this stage of the game, legislative change is needed to change the company structure. It's long overdue. I would suggest that when you look at the way circular economy funding is divvied up, that it is increasing without that change in company law, where you're being more resource. The bigger companies getting the bigger circular economy grants. They're doing good stuff. It's very difficult to attack, isn't it? It's like kicking a puppy, But when you really sort of strip away what's actually happening, to echo my earlier point, you're becoming more the big companies. This applies to the big companies becoming more resource efficient, and then channeling the profits to somebody to buy a second yacht, basically exaggerating to make a point, but I think you see where I'm coming from. It would be interesting, would it not, to see what a pie diagram would look like in the UK and Wales and even Scottish government of where taxpayers' money goes in terms of the three sectors. I might be pleasantly surprised. I don't know, but perhaps somebody else could follow this up. But when you look at the 2007-2008 crash alone, that was 137 billion, eye-watering figures for a bailout to banks. So we don't want socialism when it's benefiting people and communities, but we do in Britain generally want it when it's to support the large banks. So we really need to be asking some. I don't think these are radical questions, really. These are moral ones, but there we go. So I don't really have a problem with the donut model. You know, the ecological ceiling we shouldn't expand beyond, and we shouldn't fall below the social foundation, the center of the donut where we just fall into the abyss. We have to stay in that sweet donut, so to speak. But I think we can add to it. I think we can now evolve to thinking about, look at it like one of those old spider graph things I used to have back in the 70s. Think of us, we community people, as the stitching, forever looping and bringing it back and tying it, weaving it into our communities. What are we weaving? Resources, because we can tax wealth at its creation, but we can keep the wealth in our communities before it's converted into money, through all of the systems that are spread throughout Wales at the moment. Too many to go into there. Selwyn's got a pile of them in the Blaenau Ffestiniog area. We can transform Wales if we hold on to resources, and you know, and the same goes for any part of the globe, communities in general. So
Eifion, just to dweud, mae gennych 3 munud ar ôl.
Oh, 3 minutes. I'll race through them. In terms of the hope, look what, and this was inspired by Selwyn a few years ago when I saw him speak at the DVLA building in Swansea. You know, look at the kind of things in communities we built through worker subscription. I mean, the Llai Miners Institute just down the road from where I was born. You know, it looks like a little mini White House, for goodness sake. You know, and you know, we shouldn't be thinking in terms of the crumbs off the table anymore. In terms of weaving money back into the system, the mutual credit system is something that can help local SMEs thrive, who are 99% of businesses, but get the raw deal. If you want to read my report, it's a Churchill Fellowship report. Just type my name in. We've built the Celyn system, which is a mutual credit system. It needs to be all Wales to have critical mass, but it will have at its centre. It will be designed by its very nature. It will be designed for communities. That's the final slide, really. So it's a sort of an amalgam of different things, but a DIY approach, because I do feel that we can ask government of varying colour, but at the end of the day, there are forces to make sure that government is smaller, and there are plenty of examples dotted throughout our history and more recent history that we can do it ourselves, and we've got the resources to do so. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you ever so much, Eifion, for a very sort of thought-provoking presentation from the courthouse in Ruthin. I think what I've picked up on is that notion of how circular economies can be very insular within themselves. And we're sort of looking at these concentric loops, like you said, the spirograph, and I know all of it's related to place, but if those ideas are not federated and grown, they sit in isolation, but they can also be adopted and used for perhaps ill good, or used to whitewash how it's being perceived. I don't know if I have any major questions at the moment. There's a comment that the community movement Cymru is grappling with many of these injustices and challenges at the moment, and I would absolutely agree. I think Sue is inviting everyone to welcome to join and work together for change. And I think that picks up the idea that if you join forces, you join skills, you federate ideas, you federate opportunities, but starting with place as your sort of marker, as your Lego brick initially, the real strength can be drawn. I'm going to move on to our next and final speaker before opening to the floor for general questions and discussion. I'm very interested in the views of participants, particularly in relation to where we can all act and where some of these links can be made. So do have some thoughts ready. Put your thoughts in the chat too. I would now like to introduce Paul Hughes from Pembrokeshire Frame. Delighted to have you here on the screen, Paul. Paul joined the charity as a project manager after working for an educator for over 30 years, which I find hard to believe, holding a variety of senior leadership roles. We're delighted to have you. And your focus, I understand, has been to help the charity recover primarily from the challenges around the COVID pandemic, but much more too. So over to you, Paul. Thank you ever so much. And thank you, Avion.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk about Frame. It's getting a bit boring in my household at the moment. My wife says I talk about it far too much. It used to be education before that. Now it's reuse and recycling, and she's banned me from bringing things home anymore. Listening to the two speakers before, I'm going to try and pick up on some of the points around what Frame does in order to try and address some of the issues, obviously, that and the process that we have that actually, are relevant to what the two previous speakers have done. Frame actually stands for Furniture Recycled and Managed Efficiently. It was an idea that a lady by the name of Jenny Sims had. Avian, I know, will know Jenny very well, and she spotted that there was a lack of opportunity within the area to support people who had learning disabilities or mental health issues, and from that she grew this idea, grew this organization that then offered people an opportunity to get involved, to come along, get training, to have jobs based around recycling furniture or reusing furniture, as I was probably saying now. And so the organization is 31 years old. It's officially a charity for over 30 years this week. And so we obviously have particular responsibilities that we have to carry out as people, as officers, and as with the board, the trustees, obviously, of the organization. So it is about working with people with mental health issues. So everything that we do is looking to support them, developing their self-worth, their personal well-being. Through that, we look to educate and to train. And so there has been Frame's always had a strong training program in terms of enabling people to develop new skills. Another key driver for us, which again fits in obviously to some of the other previous points the other speakers have made, is around mitigating the effect of poverty and social deprivation. And as we go through, obviously I'll pick up in terms of some of the support that we are able to offer to our local community. Obviously, everything that we do in terms of reuse, recycling, is also contributing to the enhancement and the protection of our environment as well. And that's obviously another key driver for us in terms of measuring our own performance, how we're performing and what we're doing. And the final point really is about employment. We do employ 42 people within our organization. The majority of those people have come to Frame to get support or been referred to us for training, and so we've got a really high percentage of people who come to us and stay and actually then take part. In fact, the last appointment I made just 9 weeks ago was of a young lady who came to us wanting some to build up her confidence. She came and worked in the shop. Here she is 9 months later. She actually got the job as our new retail assistant and is doing a fantastic job in terms of improving the retail offer and running the shop for us. So we obviously look to try and put in place and in action, obviously, what we're looking to do. Frame grew from a small bungalow. It went to a local industrial unit in a place called Johnston, just outside Haverfordwest. Where we are now is that we have a large building, which used to be a print works, based in Merlin's Bridge in Haverfordwest. We've also, in the last 5 years, had a grant from the Welsh Government to create the Green Shed, which is something over my shoulder. And that basically is a community reuse centre. So it has workshops, it has meeting rooms, and charities are able to use it. And we've also had a cafe there in the past. We've now sort of moved it over to retail, high-end retail, specifically looking for a different market in terms of our clientele. We also rent a building down in Pembroke Dock, which also is a retail centre. And we also work with another local charity called the VC Gallery. It's a veterans charity, and we share their property. We hire a room from them in their property in Pembroke Dock, where we run workshops on upcycling furniture and on sustainable fashion. One other important part of our job, and this is where Frame has been very well supported by our local authority, is certainly about a quarter of the business that we do is through a contract with the local authority. And so we run their local bulky waste contract and their recycling contract. And we're part of something called the Reuse Network, which is an organisation that lots of charities, community interest companies are affiliated to. And lots of them do run local waste collection services. And the contract for that, which is up for renewal, but the whole purpose of that contract was that it should be a social contract and that it should provide opportunities for people to get experience, but also have some employment as well. And so, that's certainly, again, when you're looking about people with learning disabilities and mental health issues, one of the key drivers for us as an organisation is to make sure that where in the past these people were offered opportunities to volunteer, one of the things that we're trying to change is that in future they should be offered proper paid employment and an opportunity to develop themselves and to develop their skills and to undertake training. And that's certainly something that came back from our questionnaires, the work that we've done, the surveys that we've done with our clients. They were very clear that they liked volunteering in our organisation. They felt very welcome, but really what they wanted was paid opportunities. They really wanted a job. And I think over the past 3 or 4 years, we've seen a significant drive for those people to get real paid opportunities for them to undertake meaningful work. So as I said, we're a charity that's 30 years old. We offer quite a wide range of opportunities. As I said, we've got 42 staff. We do offer daycare. So we do have contracts with local authorities to provide day services, and for a percentage of the people that come to us. Altogether, we've got 107 volunteers who come into our organisation each week. We've got 60 people who are here on placements, who we're obviously paid to support. So we need to put a support program in and around those and basically look to give them meaningful opportunities. And how we do that is through a range of activities. I've talked about the retail shops. So again, we obviously look to give people training in and around the retail. We've got a very active eBay group that donations are priced, advertised. And again, we've got a number of people working on that who have come to us for support, and we've been able to turn that into employment. With the donations that we have, which come in every day that we're open, we're able to help people learn skills around warehousing, how to crew a van. We've even got people who come in and spend days going through our books and our DVDs, and what they're doing is sorting them, maximizing in the potential, obviously, for us as a charity to be able to turn that into income in order to provide and sort our services. There are 4 key projects that we run within the organisation as well. And again, these are very much based in and around circular economy. It's about reusing, repairing, upcycling items. The one that's been here longest is one of a kind. And again, that's a project which has people refer to it. It's upcycling the furniture. Furniture come in, it can be painted, it can be waxed, it can be altered quite significantly. And that furniture then is offered for sale within our retail units. The VC Gallery, we've recently begun work there so that the furniture that is upcycled and produced at the VC Gallery in Pembroke Dock actually then goes on sale in the Pembroke Dock shop. So we're trying to make sure that, you know, that people can see that these are the local opportunities for people to come in and to be involved, to upskill themselves, and then basically you know, sell the items locally as well. The first project that I started developing when I came to work at Frame was the furniture surgery, and that was a long-term investment for us in terms of supporting an individual to become a master craftsman in relation to furniture upholstery. And we're getting towards the end of that process now. And what has happened basically is that we've gone from upcycling, refurbishing furniture to actually now running classes for the local community so that people can bring their own items in and repair their own items and obviously take those skills and use them themselves as well. So that certainly is again a long-term investment, putting the skills in the community, offering people the opportunity to come and do that, and certainly as we go forward, we're looking to hopefully get a significant return in relation to the number of people that are coming in and then are participating in that, and ultimately impacting on the amount of items that go to landfill. We've always had a very well-equipped workshop here, which when furniture comes in, our team look at it, they make a judgment as to whether or not it can be we can sell it or it can be repurposed in some way. And I've got a group of very talented people who work in our wood workshop who develop those items. And again, the whole point of the wood workshop is about bringing people in, giving them the opportunity to learn skills and produce items, and for us then obviously to offer those items out on sale. So we do produce things like bird boxes and planters and hedgehog houses. But also recently, one of our participants, who was a young man with significant disabilities, he actually built a chair, very not dissimilar to the chair that Eifion was talking about in his piece. He modelled it on the chair used at the Eisteddfod, and he built it completely from laminated wood, working alongside our one of our team. And again, it just goes to show that the capability and the power, obviously, of providing that support and the opportunities that can basically come from it. One project that we started 18 months ago, which has just come to an end because of the grant funding has been completed, but we concentrated on sustainable fashion. And one of the things that we do in both our stores, we're very aware that we're looking to provide secondhand, if you want to call it that. We like to call it reused or pre-loved. We look to provide the opportunities to buy furniture or other items at a very reasonable price, because we are aware, certainly in the past 3 years, that with the cost of living crisis, that people are looking to alternative sources in terms of furniture. And it's one of the things that we've tried to base the work, you know, all our shops, everything that we do is about producing good quality, but at very reasonable prices. And all in all, I think that's been really successful. One of the most successful projects we've had has been around sustainable fashion. So we've been able to employ somebody local within Pembrokeshire who has a background in the fashion industry, has had her own fashion label, shown her items at a London Fashion Week, came to work with us in order to start a sustainable fashion project around repurposing items, material that we have, but just also going through and making sure that the clothes that we have donated are sorted, sifted, items that can be repurposed, we put them back in the shops. And through that project, we not only were able to offer We had 25 volunteers come in and take part of it. We've also been able to give them opportunities to learn how to use sewing machines, but to do the whole process in terms of preparing garments for sale, pricing them, displaying them. And we've radically improved our presentation of the clothes in our Merlin's Bridge store, and we're just beginning that process now in Pembroke Dock. I mean, that's the success for us, is about the reaction that we have from the people, what they say about what the projects have brought to them. We were very lucky that the BBC came recently, did a little piece about us and about the project as well. And what was so great was that the key part of the message that was going out was that they interviewed two of our participants who basically said that the project had really changed their lives. They were very much hiding away through COVID, not get to see anybody, but having the opportunity to come in. Not only they learned new skills, but it had really changed their lives in terms of coming out, getting involved, developing friendships, and having that socializing opportunity, basically. What does that look like? I mean, in terms of the financial return for us, because we are a non-profit company, all the money is ploughed back into supporting us and developing what we going on. But we've increased sales there by over 300%. And that's not just through using the shop, but also selling items on Vinted as well. But all that money basically comes back to supporting the charity. One of the things that we did do over the period of certainly the cost of living crisis was we looked to develop opportunities to work with people who were struggling in our community. So we actually engaged with Wales and the West Utilities and employed somebody who was able to advise on fuel poverty. Frank has come in and he has engaged with the community right across the whole of Pembrokeshire and supported them in looking at how they could reduce their living costs. We also did a number of projects. We provided 30 families with a slow cooker and meals and the ingredients for meals for 14 weeks, which basically meant that they could not use the full cooker, but cook these healthy meals. And that had a significant impact because we targeted the local school and the families there that were on free school meals. It did help a great many of them. This last winter, we actually did a similar project, but this time we used a soup maker as the theme. And not only did we provide 40 families this time with a soup maker and the food and the ingredients, but our practitioners here actually came in and they worked on the project by testing the soup, buying the items, packing them all up and distributing them. And not only did that, but they also did the financial record keeping and they also did the final report as well. So those we've certainly tried to make sure that we have we're focusing on our target group here. They were vulnerable. Lots of them were finding it tough, and we were able obviously to support a significant number of them through the processes that we've basically got. Certainly from our point of view,
just for a minute, yeah, you're nearly there. Please.
I'm nearly there. Basically, for us, we've got 104 volunteers, but we've got spaces for 100 more. We need to improve the training element in terms of what we're looking to offer. But what is the challenge going forward is actually having the money to continue to support these projects. 2 years ago, we had a £20,000 grant from the local authority to support homeless people. Last year, it was 10,000. This year, it'll be nothing. Last year, we actually provided £20,000 worth of free furniture and items to homeless people. And that for us is the challenge going forward, is finding the resources so that we continue to support the people obviously who are facing the cost of living crisis. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. It's worth saying that Pembrokeshire Frame are an exemplar in Wales. It's sort of known nationwide for doing some really fantastic work. So thank you. And I think that link between sort of the practical world of sort of sofas, shelves, soup, and how it resonates with individual well-being for people and how you're looking at building community too. I think that's the real link. It's that alignment between the two, that they're not separated. Something else I picked up on is around the role of the local authority, enabling some of that to happen through the contract work. And that seems to be a great example of best practice, but conversely, the resources are being cut, which sort of comes back to that earlier point raised by Stuart around how local authorities can really be leaders in some of this work.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. We have a question from earlier, which I'll bring to the presenters. I don't know, Kelly, if you want to pin people back, but I'm also interested in thoughts from those who are attending here today, because I know there's so much experience in the world. And it's a question about the Welsh context. Are the nuances in the Welsh context? Is there a Welsh context, firstly? Means, you know, there is a devolved policy context, certainly, but are there sort of specific, we have a specific cultural history. Are there any nuances that are worth bringing to the table to discuss around being in Wales specifically? And I'm very interested in participants contributing to the debate too. So if you want to raise your hand at any point, do, but I'll start with the presenters. Specifics in Wales.
Yeah, I can go first as the first presenter. We have done a fair amount of work across Wales. So we've done a lot of work around the food system. We've done work on social care. But community wealth building, to be honest, hasn't grown organically in Wales in the same way it has done in England or perhaps in Scotland. And I'm not really sure why, because all the ingredients are there. You know, you've got this really progressive policy framework around the well-being of future generations. You've got your PSB structures across the entire country, which are ready-made anchor networks. And we have had engagement with several PSBs, but for some reason it hasn't grown in the same way, and I'm really not sure why that is. Perhaps because you do have a more progressive framework in which you're operating in, you've got different agendas that perhaps take priority. Whereas in England, I guess local authorities have got less of that supportive national framework. Perhaps that's it, but I'm really not sure why.
Okay, it's a really good point about why. Why is it? Is it perhaps called something different? Is it perhaps something that's operating organically at different levels? I'd be really interested in some thoughts. So yeah, either Avion or Paul, any thoughts about in Wales specifically? Thanks, Stuart. Those are really useful.
I'll offer something in terms of, you know, being new to the reuse community, the circular economy community. One of the things I've obviously gained from my conversations with colleagues in England is that obviously Wales has had a real drive around improving reuse, reducing waste, and certainly Frame has been very well supported through grants in order to do that. So the Green Shed, it was a grant basically to encourage the community come in to participate, to build skills, and that's something obviously which again through COVID we're trying to make sure that we're rebuilding. So we do have one of our projects based in a workshop in there, and certainly I've never, there's been plenty of opportunity of support for this particular charity and the work that we're doing. So in Wales, perhaps not in so much as some of the models that Stuart's obviously talking about elsewhere. There are some examples locally where communities are now starting to buy pubs and buy post offices and shops because funding has become available. And so there are some of those models, starting to be, being realized within the local community. But certainly from our point of view, the agenda has been there to support us, and it's been support. And again, we've had the support through finance as well to make it happen.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Really good to hear that you do feel that support's been there. I mean, I think there's a couple of comments in there that I'll pick up. One is that from Sandra Bays is that we don't have the Localism Act in Wales. I'm interested, Sandra, in how you feel that has informed some of what we're talking about. And then a couple of quick points about the PSB. and the Future Generations Act, which is that the PSB don't have any public services boards, does not have resources, and seems to have a problem pooling resources. I mean, that's the sort of the essence of it. And as one of the sort of statutory requirements of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, that the public services boards exist there to undertake it, perhaps that's one of the reasons why it's not being as impactful as it should be. Avion, and then I'll come to
there's certainly a relevance, a huge relevance to all of this agenda across Wales. The community I was brought up in Wales is by no means unique. I think it's a typical story, a Welsh story, in that when I was growing up in the 70s, I was looking back, this was about 10 years ago, counting the number of shops, services, institutions, social institutions that existed in the village of Bwlch-gwyn. The reason why I did it is because the sign on the edge of our village saying we were the highest village in Wales was proven to be wrong. So it was a lie, an admin error by the council, apparently. So in order to regain some pride, it sort of kicked off some thoughts in my head in terms of how can we rejuvenate communities? The number of shops and services was around 30 in the 70s when I was growing up, and it had whittled down to 2 or 3 at the last count. I was having an interesting discussion with Welcome to Our Woods about their precious plastic project that we're developing alongside them, and they said to them that capture of resource, even though it will be on a small scale compared with the vast amounts of wealth and material that was ripped out of their communities over a 150-year period, they feel that in some small way it's very symbolic and empowering of they are at last grabbing hold of a local resource and controlling it themselves. And when you look at the social model landscape or cooperative landscape across Wales, the Wales Cooperative, the old Wales Cooperative Centre, now Cwmpas, which is an umbrella for cooperatives, is the largest in Europe. And it often gets missed in the mix, doesn't it? The Wales's achievements on recycling, which started off as in communities, it gets missed in the mix because we get seen as the UK in terms of the league table of recycling globally. Wales, apart from Welsh government and ourselves shouting about it, we get lumped into the UK. If you pull Wales out of the equation, we're around second or third, well, knocking on second in the world. Only a couple of percentage off silver. So there's a lot to be proud of, and there's a lot of innovation here, and I think we're building it ourselves. I think we just need to give ourselves a bit of a pat on the back, really. We haven't got a Localism Act, but we have got the Wellbeing of Future Generations, but all of these acts and they're frameworks that are reacting to us in communities, as far as I can see. It's in terms of chicken and egg, it's certainly communities who've been pushing this agenda for many years. So
Yep.
So yeah, and I've got faith in that communities will continue to do that.
Me too. Thank you. Snap. I've got a hand up from Michelle, and then I've got a question related to some of the points in the chat around PSBs and the resources that they have, i.e. people, land. How can that be incentivised in the way that perhaps anchor institutions are doing so in England? So that's a question that we'll come to in a moment. So have a think about that. I'm going to come to Michelle first.
Thank you, Jessie. Stuart, I think this is more of a question for you in terms of like CLACE and the work that you do. I think community wealth building is really, really interesting model. It's a shame to hear that there's nothing sort of revolutionary really happening in Wales around that agenda, which is disappointing. I'm from Coalfields Regeneration Trust, so as a region we're really struggling with the the loss of the mining industry in our communities. And this, the wealth building, community wealth building approach is something we've been doing for years around, asset transfer support, supporting financial, credit unions as alternative financial institutions, social enterprise development. So we've been doing quite a bit of work around that. I was just wondering, for us, it's that region that's really impacted economically and socially. And in Scotland, I understand they've gone for like a national approach to community wealth building policy drive there. As that's a national approach, is that having impact on the scale that was hoped? So it'd be interesting to have an update on that, to see if there was a policy shift in Wales, is that likely to create change? Or are we more looking at that community-led or local authority-led approach? Is that more successful? And the other thing I just wanted to mention, as well as the PSBs, you've got the new corporate joint committees coming into force with local authorities, as regional, sort of looking at more of the infrastructure, I suppose, the bigger strategic projects. Is this another thing that could be bolted onto that if it's around economic development and potential for that there? And do you, sorry, I've got lots of questions. And to you as Claes, you said it's interesting that you're a think and do tank. So I was wondering, in terms of the do, how do you support other organisations to really drive on things like community wealth building locally?
Thanks, Michelle. So, how many questions are lovely orchestra of questions. I don't know where you want to start.
I might have to come back to you, Michelle, and get those again. But I think, Scotland has taken quite a different approach because it has had that national government support that we haven't had in England. And it's hard to know whether that is going to actually translate into better outcomes, because, okay, yes, we do have a minister for community wealth building in Scotland, which is amazing. We have legislation which is in draft, but that will kind of mainstream community wealth building as an approach, as an economic development approach, and it will give it national coverage. But if it doesn't come with support and resources, then does it just become a box ticking exercise, which then actually takes the kind of creativity and the innovation that you get from when it's built from the bottom up? So there's a risk. There's risks and rewards. But so we're very kind of conscious of how we avoid it becoming just something that every local authority has to do. We have to have a community wealth building action plan. Tick the box. Let's just copy the next door neighbours, and then where it really works is where the community are engaged from the outset, that it's driven by local passion, local energy, local desire, and that you're not just going through these kind of 5 pillars, just ticking them off. It's like, well, actually, we're just interested in the food system. Let's just come together as a community with the business sector, with the public sector, with all the anchor institutions, and let's just work on the food economy. We've got places, it's not even called community wealth building in most places. In Preston, it's the Preston model. In Gateshead, it's the Thrive agenda. So community wealth building doesn't need to be the language. It's a set of principles and ways of working. But if it's not equally bottom up and top down coming together, there's a risk that it just becomes another strategy, another thing that you have to do, and it gets forgotten about. So there's a real risk. So we help organisations think through the process, places think through the process, and develop these strategic approaches. But then we work with them to implement those kind of pilot projects on the ground. So, for example, we've got a pretty well developed employment program now in Birmingham, where we've brought the institutions together to really address entry-level employment. So we've designed a new way of employing, which really shifts the conception of what employment's about. So it's not about necessarily employing the best person for the job. It's about finding the best job for the person. So it meets the person where they are. it builds pre-employment support around them, and it finds them a route into public sector employment, which typically has greater routes for progression, more stable, more secure work, and gets people into good jobs in the public sector. Then they can progress, and they can progress rather than working on 0 hours contracts for minimum wage. We've got examples of procurement hubs where we're actively involved in shaping procurement activity in terms of market engagement, in terms of brokering connections with the social economy, so that we can find the spaces to stimulate the growth of new enterprise in place, which can supply the needs of the public sector, creating new enterprises in places that need economic opportunities. So we do get involved as a critical friend, as an advisor, and as a convener, and brokering those conversations to try and make these things actually happen on the ground.
Okay.
I've forgotten the other questions, Michelle. Which ones have I missed?
I think they were the key ones. The other point was around the corporate joint committees, those new structures, which like regional, similar to the Cardiff Capital Region and the Swansea Region, Capital Region Development Programme set up. These are local authorities coming together for big, more strategic regeneration initiatives. So I'm thinking, would this perhaps sit with them?
Yeah, absolutely. There's examples. The North Ayrshire Growth Deal, I think it's 3 or 4 billion. What is it? Edinburgh and South East Scotland Growth Deal. Partly driven by that kind of Scottish national government framing, but community wealth building principles are really shaping these large funding programs, multi-billion pound programs with community wealth building principles built into them, more so in Scotland than in England.
Okay, thanks ever so much. I think that question of scale is something that is emerging in lots of the questions and lots of the comments about scale being very localized, but in some ways or larger scale, but the prohibitors to that are around reliance on grants, layers of bureaucracy, and that at every level, be that very localized, as Paul said, some of the practical implications are sort of being damaged by some of that lack of resourcing. And I'm not sure whether the question of a larger scale would aid that. I know that question in the chat about the focus of Wellbeing and Gen Act is around regional infrastructure rather than that concrete action. And sometimes it's easier to talk about infrastructure than it is about the action themselves. We're coming towards the end. There's a couple more points I want to pick up from the chat. Imagine what our town centres could look like if we allowed social enterprises and communities to take a lead rather than local authority economic regeneration teams. Good question, good point. I think some of the examples that were shown earlier, Stuart, are really testament to that. And I think certainly some of the models in North Wales I could mention that would express the same thing. I'm conscious that we've been talking about a bit of a collective vision here today, or about people coming together, different ways where people come together. The Resourceful Communities Partnership is one place that's in the title, Resourceful Communities Partnership. And I'm wondering if there's anybody on the call who'd like to say a bit about the RCP. I'm also aware that CMC, Community Movement Cymru, has been mentioned by a couple of people today. I know that several are in the audience. So if anybody'd like to say anything about either of those two places where people gather nationally across Wales, so that we can think about bringing this vision and this movement together, please put your hand up before I call you out. Would Sue like to say anything about RCP? I'll ask Michelle to talk about CMC first, if you want to say a few words, and then I don't know if Sue Denman or Selwyn want to add into that also. Michelle, say a few things about CMC.
I'm trying to type in my contact details as well in the comments there, if anyone wants more information on Community Movement Cymru. Basically, it's a national Wales-wide movement which is place-based for place-based community organisations. and really, it's a place where we can come together collectively and talk about some of these like big issues, systemic issues impacting on communities that we're all often trying to work on the ground to deliver local support. But is an opportunity to come together collectively as a movement so that we can influence and inform policy. So that it's the power in the collective really, and being a bit more radical around like what we talked about today, really, economic development, and lots of like health issues perhaps impacting our communities. So it's bringing people together, sharing learning, sharing the expertise as well. So a lot of our members are experts in things like we talked about financial institutions. So one of our members is one of the biggest credit unions in Wales. So they are opening branches on high streets in response to closure of banks. So they can provide support to other members who might be trying to do something locally on access to financial services. We've got research and development experts on as a part of the movement as well. So it's really helping people sort of think about how they evaluate and monitor and demonstrate the impact that their organisation is having. So there's social enterprise Selwyn's a member. So there's experts with lots and lots of different areas of interest who are willing to share those skills with communities across Wales. So we want to really empower communities to find solutions to their local issues, and again, just come together on the policy issues as well to inform. Sometimes, like we were saying around some of the legislation, isn't it, like the Future Wellbeing Generations Act, that's in place, but is that being, is that a tick box in lots of instances? What is actually happening on the ground? Do we need to see policy change on some on these things where there's policy in place, but it's not quite connecting with communities, so that it's power together really. That's what we're about. Anyone else from CMC want to add anything to that?
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. I'm not seeing any hands going up. I think that was a really good overview. Sue Leonard, who I was hoping might say a few words about RCP. Together for Change is a member of the governance group. So I'll just say it's a national forum, a multi-agency and cross-sector partnership promoting community-led action, influencing, sharing learning, carrying out research, open meetings and learning events is a resourceful community partnership, of which this event today is one of them. So I think if there are no final comments, it seems a shame to bring the conversation to a close. But I would just like to thank, on behalf of Together for Change, PAVS and the Resourceful Communities Partnership, thank you to everybody for attending today. Thank you, Stuart, Avion and Paul, for sharing your thoughts and giving such a sort of strong message about where the roles for circular economic principles and community wealth building can fit. I think it's the start of a conversation, and I hope that the energy in the room can be galvanised to create more in that future movement for communities in Wales and beyond. So thank you ever so much. There is an evaluation form in the chat and we would really welcome your feedback. Please do keep in touch. If you'd like to join the Resourceful Communities Partnership or CMC and are interested in either of those, then contact myself or Michelle or Kelly. And please sign up for future events as part of this programme and keep in touch. It's been a great conversation today. Thank you to everyone.